Good morning, everyone. Thank you for showing up. It's always fun when people show up to the party that you're hosting. Thank you so much for coming, and happy Women's Entrepreneurship Week! Day 4 of 5, it's been a dream. So we have a few thank yous, and then I can't wait to get into the discussion today. First, a huge thank you to Melnick and Melnick. She Stands Tall, who has taken the baton of Women's Entrepreneurship Week. Thank you so much. Thank you to EBI, Emmons Business Interiors, for lending us this space for many events this week as well. Yay! And thank you, Julie, wherever she might be fluttering around, who's been helping. And a big thank you to Summit Credit Union, who is sponsoring this week of Women's Entrepreneurship Week. Yay! Led by a female CEO and COO, they firmly believe in lowering the wealth gap for women, and particularly women entrepreneurs, which is what we're all about. I'm Elizabeth Szynski. I am the director of Scale Up Milwaukee, which is an economic development initiative under the Greater Milwaukee Committee. We focus to help companies grow with a particular emphasis on BIPOC and women-owned companies, knowing that when businesses grow, good things happen. We have some wonderful events coming up, which are beautifully displayed over here by Mr. Jared Lee. Thank you, our marketing manager. So we hope to see you at some upcoming events as well. I'm so excited for this morning's conversation. I'm not even going to give introductions because DeShaun will do such a better job. So without much further ado, DeShaun E. Robinson, business coach of Scale Up Milwaukee, and Christine Specht, CEO of Cousins Submarines.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Really? I was telling Christine a little bit ago, I was coaching the youth team yesterday, so if you can't hear my voice or it goes in and out, that's because, it's not because I'm sick or anything like that. But no, thank you for being here on another beautiful day that we don't have as many beautiful days that I've seen recently. But thank you to Christine for being here, the CEO of Cousins Subs. And because it's Women's Entrepreneur Week, we want to make sure that we recognize her for some of the things she's kind of done in the past. She's been with the Journal. Are you good?
Trying to turn it off.
She's recognized from the Journal as a woman of influence. From another magazine, she's represented as a woman in lead. So we want to make sure that we continue to kind of celebrate women, not just for 1 week, but all the time. And I know there's an emphasis this week, but we really appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation today.
Yeah. So I have a funny kind of question. How many times does people, when you come and you talk, either say they're hungry or ask if you bring food? Or
They do. They actually do ask that a lot. I'm sorry, I actually didn't even think about bringing anything today. Of course, we don't really serve breakfast, but yeah, usually the people want to know. And the other thing they want to know is, why is the company called Cousins Subs? And I tell them it's because my dad and his cousin started it. Now we're in our 51st year. So they were just two cousins, and that's where they got the name. So that's usually what people ask.
Congrats. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about your journey. I think there's kind of 3 parts to it, right? There's the part where you were born into a family who presented a concept and were entrepreneurial. And then there's a part where you are growing up and you kind of have to figure out, like, do you want to go into the business or do you not? And then there's present day. Can you kind of take us through that journey?
Right. So as I said, my dad and his cousin started Cousins just a year before I was born. So, and you know, they were the true entrepreneurs, right? They bought an old or they leased an old pizza restaurant on 60th and Silver Spring was the first location. They like pooled money together. I think they had like $6,000 between the two of them. They were not wealthy, and you know, and my dad's cousin is still in Atlantic City at the time. So, you know, he brought him over. They started the business, and then it continued to grow. And for him, my dad just wanted to start he missed the East Coast style sub sandwich that he knew from Atlantic City, New Jersey. So he wanted to bring that here. And then it just continued to grow and find success. So I think his goal ultimately was just to make sure that he could support his family. And then, but then he was fortunate to have that growth. So, you know, and so then as I entered the picture, of course it was my first job, you know, when I was 15, and I still remember my first day of work, and it was scary. You know, I'd been in that restaurant, and it was a restaurant in Germantown, and I was there countless times before, but it's really different when you're behind the counter. So I was very nervous, but it went okay, and they invited me back to for a second day. But the cool thing is that my parents never said, you're going to do this, you're going to be like the second generation, and you have to run this business after I retire, you know. And I think back to how much freedom that had given me, because then I could pursue my own interests. You know, I went to Marquette, I have a degree in criminology and law studies. It's nothing to do with making and selling subs. I have a master's in public administration, again, nothing to do with selling subs. So, but they allowed me the freedom to do that, and I think, you know, because Cousins was my dad's dream and my parents' dream, and that was their business, they made that work, but they didn't expect or assume that it was my dream and my business, that I wanted to take the lead. And I think that's really instrumental for those first gens to get to the second gen. You have to make sure the second gen wanted it. Ultimately, I came around because I saw an opportunity in human resources at Cousins, and that's really kind of how I entered then as an adult.
Gotcha. And I know you said you had a degree in criminology. Mm-hmm. Was there anything else you wanted to be? Like, I mean, is there, like, growing up, you have this other dream? Was there anything else that kind of?
Yeah, well, I was thinking maybe going to law school. Yeah. So, and I did okay on the LSATs. I mean, it didn't like me, you know, it's no bells and whistles or anything, but I mean, I could have done it, but then I don't know, I just decided not to, and instead after college did a year of volunteer work with homeless families in Florida. I thought if I was volunteering, at least I would do it somewhere warm most of the time, most of the year round. That was a really great experience. That really shaped my next educational kind of pursuit, and then really kind of helped me focus on this idea of service to others, and how service to others doesn't have to be a social worker helping homeless families get them off the street, right? Service to others could be in any position that you're in, and mine is what I think of it today is I serve others, and it doesn't, you know, that through that journey I was able to have that continuum of this service mindset and just be able to accomplish that really no matter what I was doing.
Awesome. And so most recently I learned that you actually work in the business throughout the week. And I think most CEOs of food restaurants, like, they don't do that. Can you tell me about how that looks each week?
Yeah, I love it. So I work in our corporately owned restaurants. We have 47 corporately owned restaurants. So I work in all of them once per year over the lunch hour. So, you know, and some days I'm in the restaurants 3 days a week. Sometimes it's one. It just depends on my schedule. But I want to hit all of them. And why I do that is for a couple of reasons. One is because I love to build and recognize the teams that are really making it happen. So my office is maybe not as beautiful as this office here, but it's a nice office, you know, but yet the action of making and selling sub sandwiches and connecting with the community doesn't happen in my office. It happens out there in the field. So I feel like I need to stay connected to what we do, which is making and selling subs, and we do that for a lot of reasons, but to stay connected to that and to the people that are actually making that happen on a daily basis. So I love to support the teams, and then it helps me live one of our values. We have 4 of them. One of them is grounded, so it keeps me grounded, right? Because there's nothing really glamorous about making and selling some sandwiches, but it's a way to, it can be life-changing, so to speak, because of all the different ways you can utilize that product or work with employees. So I love to just stay connected like that, and it's one of the best parts of my job. I love.
Gotcha. And so how many times do people come in there and recognize you, that you have to come behind the counter and take a picture?
Sometimes that does happen. They look at me like, you know, because I just have my name tag. I mean, I'm in full uniform, right? Big ponytail, you know, name tag, all that, you know, and so it makes for getting ready for work in the morning really easy, which I appreciate that. But yeah, sometimes they do recognize me. We have a partnership with Donald Driver too. We just started that at the end of last year. Donald and I were at one of our stores in Oshkosh, and I mean, I was definitely like a big nobody. So was Donald.
And I didn't mention this before. This is a conversation between me and Christine, but I would love for you guys to kind of chime in and ask questions. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for you all to ask questions as well. So if you need to jot something down, please don't forget that. And talking about like staying grounded and working in the business, what else have you just learned about yourself as a business owner with your various positions at Cousins?
I have learned what I'm good at, and I learned what I'm not good at. And I was just talking to Brent, and I told him that I'm like, God help us if I ever have to do the accounting in our company, right? Like, I'm not good at that, and that's okay, you know? So I think it's really having the confidence as a leader, maybe as a woman, you know, to say, that's not my wheelhouse. Like, I just need to, that's not where my strength is. Now, sometimes with solopreneurs or very small shops, you find yourself doing it all, and you're scrappy and you do it, right? But ideally, in these situations, if I can play to my strengths and hire for my weaknesses. So I just try to hire the best people that I can possibly afford to do the things that maybe I don't like to do, or that I'm not efficient at, so that I can focus on the things that I am good at. And really understanding, and that takes a long time. At Cousins, we focus a lot on emotional development, emotional intelligence, you know, leadership development, and those things. And that's like a journey. That doesn't just happen with one course. It's like a lifetime of studying and being comfortable and confident to say, like, all right, that's not my strength, but that's okay, you know, and these are my strengths. And people don't have that, right? There's people that would say, I would never get up and do this, right? And so it's just really having a comfort level with where you're at and being okay with that.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And you talk about solopreneurs, and just entrepreneurs in general. When you are working in the business, and most, I want to say, business owners start to hire family, right? And for you, I think you work with your husband, correct?
Right.
And so how do you find that balance between work and home? And also like the table talk versus the pillow talk, right? Like how do you separate all that and find the balance?
Right, so my husband, JJ, he's our director of franchise sales. So he works with my VP of development on helping franchisees either exit if they want to sell their business, or bringing new franchisees on, or doing partners. So, and then we have 2 boys at home, 7 and 10. So, you know, there's not a lot of time for conversation at the table, because if anybody that has young kids, you know, you can't even get a word in. Like, when you start talking, they somehow magically have to ask the question. That's like they have to ask at that moment. So, but JJ and I talk about work a lot, and maybe we don't actually set that boundary, because with it being a family business, you know, we are fully invested in helping this business be successful. So it kind of comes home with us, and I'm so grateful actually that he works there, because he understands all the dynamics. So like, because you know how it is when you go home and you talk to your partner, maybe they don't work with you, they kind of know, but they don't know, and like, wait, well, who is that again? So, you know, so I appreciate that he's there and he understands the kind of the bigger picture and the things that are happening, because he really gives me good counsel and advice, and he at times is more, he can help me see that bigger picture. So I appreciate that. I don't think it comes at a cost to our marriage or at a cost to parenting, because our kids, you know, they are growing up in this business too, so like they love to come to the office with me if I go on a weekend, you know, which isn't often, but it's just part of our fabric, so there's not that delineation that we have to separate. But I think that's probably because it's the family business.
Gotcha. So how many times have you had to fire him?
I was very, right, I specifically made sure that there was no like direct reporting structure, so yeah, that wouldn't go well.
Do you have any stories to tell us about, because it is a family business, like how you had to hire any family members and kind of figure that piece out? Because again, a lot of our solopreneurs hire family members, and it just doesn't work out all the time.
Yeah, it's so difficult at times. So it's worked out great with JJ's been there for over 10 years now. You know, interestingly, my brother is a franchise owner. So him and his business partner, they have 4 restaurants. So he always worked in the restaurants in management, or you know, as an employee. And that the kind of the corporate track was never his path. So there was no like, Dad didn't have to decide kind of whose path. It was kind of laid out based on strengths. So really no worries there. I would just say though that my dad, he's very blessed and grateful for what he's been able to accomplish, what Milwaukee has given him. But he would say though that one of the biggest mistakes he made was having a partner at 50-50. So because it worked at first, but then as the company grew, those two were very different people, and they had just different philosophies on growth and even growing themselves to be better as leaders. And so there was a divide there. And then and then even after his partner passed away now, back in 2007, but you know, even at that, it was tough. I mean, there was litigation, it was a lot of messiness that could have all been avoided had somebody had the control. So I would tell you that's probably one of his, when he talks to people that are going into business, he's like, no, don't do it. You think you like them now. You never know. You just never know. Or you never know if that person passes away, and then you have the family to deal with, right? So you just don't know.
That's excellent advice. Christine, we talk about you know, your husband being in a role, your brother being in a role. What advice do you have for business owners and entrepreneurs just about delegating trust, right? Because you open up a business and it's your baby, it's your thing, and you think you can do it better than everybody else, probably faster or quicker or just more efficient. How do you like relish the trust to others, knowing that the business is still going to thrive when you're not there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I sometimes draw the distinction between my dad was the true entrepreneur, and I'm really the person that's just taking that to that next level, right? So for him to have, he had an incredible amount of trust in me to say, like, back in 2008 when I became the president, and he really was, I think because we had, of course, the relationship, because it's not like I practiced for that job. I didn't sit in every department, and didn't have the degree for it, didn't sit in every department, and it wasn't a plan. So he really just trusted me to do the job, knowing that I'd make plenty of mistakes, as I do every day. But moving fast forward, to be able to delegate, I think there's a freedom with that, because it's kind of related to what I said earlier. Like if you're able, we follow a management program called EOS or Traction, if anybody's heard of it. It's just what we do and we love it. They have a thing called delegate and elevate, right? So you're gonna delegate the stuff that you're not good at and it takes too much time, or the stuff that you are good at, but it takes too much time. And they kind of break you up into quadrants, and it's really about what are you the best at for making your business grow and accomplishing your personal goals, right? So those are the areas that if you can, delegate everything else, it just, because it's, and then be okay with that.
So right now we're going through a Spark cohort, which is Spark 9, which is a accelerator program for minority-owned business owners, women-owned business owners, Latinx business owners, and we just talked about hiring. Is there any advice that you give to the hiring and retaining talent? Is there a process that you guys focus on? Just being a big corporation.
Right, and of course, hiring and recruiting is such a challenge, right? I mean, it was bananas during COVID, and then when there's a lot of money in the economy, your people are very transient, right? And because they can just go and make more money somewhere else. And so how do you combat that? Well, you set a reasonable expectation for what you think your turnover is going to be. This is the first thing, but really it's about creating that culture, because we really try to invest in our team. So, and that could be at any level. So, somebody is just hired as an hourly crew person, that might be where they stop at Cousins, and that's okay. Not everybody makes a career out of it. But if there's somebody who has potential and isn't sure what they're going to do with themselves, we can kind of show them the path that they can take, and then they can meet other really successful general managers or office personnel that were once general managers. So we really try to promote from within, to know that there's a ladder there. And then, as I said earlier, we really work hard to invest in our team. So we've launched like a leadership development program. So there's, and it's a pretty intensive program. We're using an outside resource for it, but it's really about gaining that emotional intelligence as a leader, so that you better understand how you're perceived, and then how you want to be perceived. And if there's a gap there, we give them people the skills to do that. So, and then trying to just create a great culture, right? And I'll say this: like, we're a family business. It's a really cool culture. We have fun. We work hard. We get along. There's obviously conflict and challenges, of course. But that's not for everybody either. Like, I've got a person that's leaving, he's exiting, he's an amazing individual, he's an amazing employee, but he's like, you know what? The small business, the family business isn't for me. I want big. I want international. I want travel. And it's like, great, I'm glad you know that. I can't give that to you, so let's find a way to make that happen. Let's find a mutually agreeable way to separate. So you have to kind of be okay with the culture that you have. Hopefully it's a healthy one, and that people want to be around.
Thank you for that. And so, shifting a little bit to like the branding aspect of the business, right? Entrepreneurs create this brand that is supposed to solve a problem, and then you become really, really good at it. But then some of us kind of get stuck somewhere. right? Or we need to pivot. Is there anything that Cousins did to kind of pivot their brand, whether it was the process of how you walk through it, maybe the red needed to be a little bit more redder? Was there anything that you did to help Cousins brand that kind of just changed it over and kind of evolutionized?
Right. So, and we did. So let me think here. When I first became the president, I mentioned the litigation earlier. That was like a small 6-year ordeal. So then there was like really no movement happening with the company, up until around like 2013, 14, 15, around that era. So, by that time, Cousins was a very tired brand. We were legacy in the market. We had our loyal core of guests, but we were missing a whole demographic, and we knew that because, and one of the markers and metrics that we used was our average unit sales per volume, average unit volume was decreasing, right? Still profitable companies, still could make it, but yet there was like, the trend wasn't going in the right direction. So when I came on board, and my dad had a different philosophy about how he would invest in the restaurants, right? You just have different philosophies on that. So my philosophy was we need to invest in the restaurants to capture that next generation, to refresh the brand. So then we went through kind of this whole rebranding in like 2016 with new logo and just a new decor to elevate how we are presenting ourselves within the communities where our restaurants are. So, and it's a big endeavor, but it's paid off in spades. And our employees are happier too. They love the feel and the vibe. There's no, do you want to be an old tired brand? That's kind of on the downswing? And if you do, because you're selling, that's fine. Or do you want to still try to be vibrant? And I felt like we had a second foundation. I could build a second foundation that the Cousins wasn't done yet, right? Could have sold the business back in 2013, but it wasn't done yet. We have unfinished work to do, and presenting ourselves in that way was better.
Gotcha. And when you're trying to go from good to great, what challenges does that present?
For us, we're a franchise organization, so when we say, all right, we're going to remodel our restaurants, corporately, we understand what that's going to cost, but then we're asking our franchise operators to do the same thing, right? So, and many in the franchise industry can be sometimes cutthroat, and for like really, really big concepts, it's kind of like they'll say, you need to remodel by X, in like 12 months, and then that's just what the franchisee has to do. You're at their mercy. We really try to take a better approach to say first of all, bring in franchise leadership into the rebranding process so that they could understand and see what was happening, take their feedback and their input, and then give them a really healthy timeline for which they needed to remodel the restaurants. At the end of the day, they knew they needed to remodel and have to keep up with brand standards, but we gave them a longer ability to do that because it wasn't my idea to just do that to make me happier and make sure the brand is square. And by doing that, it pushed off the kind of the consistent look in all of our restaurants. And we're still not there yet, but I think it was the right thing to do.
Awesome. And you talk about franchisee owners, and walk with me for a second. So there's franchisees and business owners who want to invest in Cousins. And we have a lot of our entrepreneurs and business owners who people approach them or seek them out to try to be investors or partners. How do you determine that right relationship and who's the best partner for you, or who should the entrepreneurs let into their business? Because I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs here who's like, hey, people are approaching me, people want to give me money, or people want to do this or that. How do you find that right partner?
You really have to do your homework and understand. First of all, have a really clear goal for yourself. So what is it that you want to achieve in 1, 3, 10 years, right? What does that look like, your path, all right? So then you think about that, right? You bring an investor in. How's that going to change things? What is the influence of that investor? What's the ownership stake of that investor? What is that going to look like for your business? How will that, try to walk yourself through, how will that impact my day-to-day decision making, things like that. Investors can be great. At this time, we're franchising, but we're still a privately held family business, right? But that doesn't mean in the future that we wouldn't bring on other partners. Really in the way we did with Donald Driver, right? I mean, we met and he's like, hey, I think we should connect and we should be partners. And so, a year later that came to fruition in our Fox Valley market, and because he believed in the brand, but but it wasn't just, but we won't sign on with just anybody. You really have to make sure that that person fits your core values, and to make sure that that we're kind of all rowing in the same direction.
More questions before we jump to you guys and ask questions as well. And kind of just sticking to Women's Entrepreneur Week, being such a dynamic woman in the community and doing all the things you do, what are some of the principles that you kind of live by, whether it's daily or whatever you have, just kind of values inside yourself?
Right. So it's funny with being a woman CEO and having that opportunity to do that, and people will ask, how is that, right? And I would just say that I had never had never in my life had I thought, oh, I'm a woman or I'm a girl, and I'm limited, or as a girl growing up, right? Like I was limited in some way to be doing something, and my parents never. That was never even a question, right? I mean, again, I said I had a brother. My dad could have said, my brother's going to run it because he's the boy, right? He's the firstborn, but that wasn't the case. It was really about, for me saying why I think this is probably the right step. So I never let my being a woman limit me in any way, and women can run companies just as easily as men can. You bring different strengths, different skill sets. You might bring a different perspective. But those things are all, if you're focused on what your goal is, I think that it doesn't, just ignore the rest of the fray, right? And just ignore that, because you will continue to be successful.
And do you find a mentor in your industry and in your lane? Is it finding that woman that is ahead of you to follow their path? Or is there an edge that you get from because there's a lot of people who want to talk to you, right? And there's a lot of people that want to talk to other people. But how do you find that right mentor as a woman?
Yeah, DeShaun, I don't really think of it kind of as a woman, right? I just think of it, there's people that really have, I think about mentors that I've had throughout my very early leadership days, and, they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself yet. And so then, but because we had this relationship, through conversations, he could kind of help and strategize, right? And then you move on, and then you have you connect with other people in your life that you can say, this is how I can, they help you see something. And sometimes it's not even a long drawn out conversation. Quick story. So years ago, probably in 2007 or so, we were considering selling the company to a German group. So my dad and I went to Germany, and this is a husband and wife team that they own these businesses and whatever. So, and I was younger and not the president. So all they said was, because we had a number of meetings together, and the guy's like, you can run this company, no problem. And you never, and so sometimes it's just a quick statement like that, I'll never forget it, because I was like, oh, yeah, maybe I can. What are they seeing in me that I'm not seeing in myself? And then, but you hear it, and you're like, all right, let me develop that. Let me understand that. So, I don't know.
No, thank you for that. And we'll try to open it up for questions now, if you would like. You guys need a remote or a remote? Right? I'm clicking it, so I'll see it. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for sharing your story. I have a lot of people that I talk to that weren't trained in business that are running businesses and that feel like they don't have the skill set. But hearing that story that somebody said that you did have the skill set, did that really change your trajectory moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think what it did was it gave me confidence. So, and I think that sometimes with, and this might happen more with women leaders, we don't always have the confidence, right? And I think that, so, for whatever reason, but, I think hearing that was like, oh, okay. But then the realization, but I don't know everything about running businesses, right? I mean, again, I didn't go to school for business. So then what I knew though is I was smart enough to know there's people out there that can help guide businesses. Even talking to Brent, right? It's just having a conversation with him, he can, people like that. I connected with people like that to help guide me in those early years to understand the business side of it, and I think then as I continue to grow in that strength, that allowed me to have the confidence to then realize what my strengths were and what they weren't.
Do you think having grown up with your dad as a mentor and your uncle, did that help you feel more capable of running the business?
I think so. You know, I'm strong-willed, and I never thought I was until my 10-year-old says and does things, and I think, I bet I did that. Right? You know, so you don't realize it. It's karma, but yeah, I think so, right? Because it was, you know, I always, my mom stayed at home, my dad worked, and you know, he was always working really hard, and so I think, you know, watching that work ethic. And I'm proud to do that. So I'm proud to show my boys that, you know, hard work pays off, and that, you know, sometimes you got to go in and you don't maybe want to go in, or you do different jobs and things, but you're setting that example for the next generation. So I think certainly watching him as an entrepreneur and then learning from him, and he still comes to the office on occasion. He still has his opinions, and you know, sometimes I think he thinks I'm still 18, but but he's pretty supportive of what I'm doing.
Brent F. Boston, Milwaukee, small business coach. Christine, I meet with a lot of businesses they're amazing at one location, and they get people to come in and be like, hey, it would be great to have you in Madison, it'd be great to have you up in Germantown. And so ultimately, they're looking at either franchising or expanding. What, from your perspective, because you're managing a lot of franchises, what are kind of those minimum conditions you would recommend a business owner have before they start looking at franchising, whether opening a second location themselves or going through all the licensing to actually create franchisees?
That's a great question, and we get that question a lot, and actually JJ will talk to business owners that he knows in the area about, because they want to step into franchising, right? Because I think people see franchising as a really quick way to grow your business and make a lot of money, and it's not that easy. So franchising you really have to have your business solid, but then you have to have the ability to know how you're going to train another. Say if you do have a franchisee, right? You have to train that. You have to have all the systems and processes in place, and it can be pretty daunting, because now all of a sudden that franchisee is running and owning, you know, your shop, but it's their shop, but it's your name and it's your reputation. So because when you have a bad experience at Cousins, you don't know if it's a franchise or a corporate owned. You just know you had a bad experience at Cousins, and you're looking at me thinking, well, they put onions on my sub last week, and they did that. And I'll say, yes, we did, and I'm sorry. And I wouldn't know if it's a, you know, and it could have been either or. So I would just say that people should talk to other franchisors to understand what they had to go through to start franchising their business. Come to the realization it's not a get rich quick scheme. It takes an incredible amount of work, and there's a lot of risk. It could take risk to your business. You can have legal risks. So I'm not saying don't do it, but it's just not turning a switch and saying we're going to franchise, and it's easy as that. And to your point, licensing, the regulations, franchise law is very complicated, and it's different in every single state. So it's really about having an understanding with that. You have to team up with a good franchise attorney to make sure that you're not getting yourself into trouble and putting your business at risk.
I have a quick question, just based on what you said, and you talked about the onions, or
Yeah.
how do you,
Sorry, it's happening. Sure.
how do you capture the testimonies from customers? Because I think sometimes the business owners, we find a hard time of doing that. How do you capture that in a good way? Can you give us advice to do that?
I love that you call them testimonies. Sometimes they're complaints, you know. People are so emboldened when, as we know, right? We're so emboldened behind our device. It's like, wait, there's a human on the other side of that reading that, you know. So we love our guests, but you know, I think the one thing with having the devices and social media, you know, there can be a more personal connection with your community, with your customers, right? And you know, we have a gal. She's running does our social media, our digital. She's doing these TikTok videos that, you know, I guess I am old because I don't totally understand them, but people love them, right? So it becomes all of a sudden really small because so and so is, you know, communicating with you on any one of the channels. We are responding to them in a personal and real way. And, you know, just having those, and then really going from guests to then really brand ambassadors, right? Like it's a cool thing. It's a lot of work, and you really, I mean, you can't do it all, but it's really great when when you can connect like that. And then, we have your standard channels where people give us feedback. And, and again, we need the feedback because we are not perfect. We are highly imperfect. So it's about really trying to always work to be better.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, look. So for my business, from the start, I've really struggled with...
What's your business?
Oh, it's at Maggie Joe's. It's the Real Good Life. It's a meal delivery service, so it's also food. And so I started small, doing everything. So I was cutting the carrots. I was figuring out next week's menu and where do I want to be in 5 years. I have more of a team, so I'm doing a little bit less than that, but still have to go through all those 3 places. So at your big team, you're still going there at lunch and cooking and needing your brain to be all those different places. How do you work that muscle and get all of those things done in a day, in a week, in a month? How do you schedule that out?
Well, I use my team, right? So, I mean, in my life, because it is a very busy schedule, and I'm not saying I'm busier than you, it's a really busy schedule, and if it's not on my calendar, it just simply isn't happening. So it just, and that is, for better or for worse, I'm told I'm regimented sometimes and inflexible because it's on my schedule or it's not on my schedule. Like, and some people don't want to be put on my schedule. I'm like, well, then we're not meeting. Right? Like, I don't know how to help you, Mom. No. But, and so right. So it's a bit of self-reflection. You should never put Mom on the schedule. Like, there's something wrong. So those are hard lessons learned. But it's really about having, about trying to balance it in. So one of the things that I do, and it's very practical because I really try to be practical, and you kind of asked about it earlier in terms of routine. So in the morning, I get up and I start with my planner, and there's many planners out there. The planner that I use is the productivity planner. It's by, the company is called Intelligent Change, and it's like a quarterly planner, and I have it with me. I'm happy to show it to you if anybody wants to see it. I love it because it aligns, it's a quarterly planner that aligns with our quarterly goals at work, but then it's also personal. Like, what am I going to do personally in my life? But then what it does is it breaks down these big, heavy quarterly goals, breaks them down into weekly tasks. So it helps keep me, like, when I wake up in the morning, I'm disciplined enough to do that, and then have an understanding what my day looks like, what my week looks like, and how it's going to roll into my month. And so it helps give me that perspective. And things fall off, I don't get things done sometimes that I want to on a week-to-week basis, so then I add it on there. But it's an accountability measure for me, because sometimes I lack self-control and self-discipline, so I need something to be held accountable to, and this planner does that. So that enables me to kind of make sure that I'm prioritizing the most important things that I have to get done. And then, all right, if there's time for that, after I'm done with that, if there's time, then I can do these other things. So I think having some type of planner that really keeps you focused, I know it sounds so silly because it's just a planner, but it helps to keep you on track.
Any other questions?
I don't really know how you kind of answered it, but at the same time, like one of my struggles, like you said, is the finance.
What's your business?
Oh, I'm Rochelle, and my business is photography. Snap Rochelle Photography, and I'm a business that I started as a hobby, and it ended up kind of just getting out there, and the finances is. Like you said, I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to take the classes and like learning, not at the point that I can afford to really just delegate it all. But even when you got to the point of delegating it, did you learn it as well just to understand it, or you just kind of put that trust? Because I don't want it to be where, I don't fully understand it, because honestly, I'm just put it out here, I still don't understand like my profit and loss. Like I'm trying to figure that out. It's just kind of coming in, but did you get advice to just sit down and learn it and then understand it, or just?
No, I did, and I feel you, because it's so, particularly with finance, if it's not in your wheelhouse, it's just like, you're just trying to absorb that and figure that out, and you also don't want to wake up one day and your bank's calling you, right? Because you've got a problem on your hands. So yes, I worked with a consultant initially early on, and they really broke it down, because again, I had no business classes, so they broke down the balance sheet, they broke down cash flow statements, they broke down the profit and loss. I mean, and at the same time, I had a general sense, but again, it wasn't my formal training. And then I had a CFO that was really helpful, and I just knew that if nothing else, I have to have the best finance person that I can have, because I can't afford to risk employees' jobs, my business, what the expectation is for the guests. And also because while I may not be an expert in those numbers, you want to have some foundational understanding so that you can ask the question to the person that you can eventually delegate it to keep, and this is not meant to sound devious, but to keep them honest, and to keep also, like, I ask questions of my finance guy, and maybe that's why he's leaving, but you know, I'll ask a question and I'll ask the same question next month, but sometimes I'll ask questions and maybe it catches an error, or maybe it helps us think differently about what we're going to do. So that curiosity is really important, especially if it's not a wheelhouse.
Thank you.
We have a finances boot camp next month, shameless plug.
You should go, right? Maybe I'll be there.
Any more? Yeah, go ahead.
What's your business?
I'm with New Eden Landscape Architecture, and I'm a block away. I'm glad to be in this building.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. And I'm a Spark graduate.
Thank you.
I know you were part of your dad's succession. How did you navigate coming into a company and being new to everybody, in a sense, as a leader? The politic of it, the cultural change, how was that? What advice do you have on someone that might be either hiring that person or being that person?
Well, fortunately, people, like the connection of people, it's one of my strengths. So, and you're exactly right. There were people at the time that had worked for Cousins and had known me since I was a child, right? So now I'm coming in and I'm like the boss. But I tried not to take it like that, right? I tried to just really try to get to work. To understand their jobs and understand them and connect with them and put them at ease. But then also just look at what the problems were for the company and say, all right, how are we going to solve for these problems? So, and that did involve turnover, right? I mean, entirely new leadership team, and because everybody I think serves, when they're on their journey, they're serving at a time that's maybe best fit, but sometimes your needs of the business change, so you have to change out your people. And I don't take that lightly, but it's just the reality of the business. So for me, it was about really connecting, being sincere, because I started in human resources in 2001 at the company, and then became the president in 2008. So I had, so the leap from that to president wasn't as big as it was kind of coming in and trying to prove myself as an HR professional, but try to be quiet when I could be quiet, listen and learn, and just continue to connect with people. Be sincere about that.
How long did it take?
Boy, that's a great question, because the company was so different up until 2015. So, I mean, there were so many challenges with culture and just even the legacy, the tiredness, the age of the stores. So, I don't think it took that long, but it's something that I always have to work on, right? I mean, I'm always mindful of my role and who I am in the company when I'm talking to even anybody today, right? And it's, for me, it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm connecting with that person and helping them be the best person that they can be at their job. So I don't think it took that long. I don't know, maybe if you ask them, they would tell you something different. No, I was happy, it seemed great.
But on the way in, I was thinking about a place I worked, and it went through new ownership, and it took like 5 or 6 years before the mistakes were settled out, and bad hires and culture changes were reversed, and it took that long before it became their company.
Yeah, and it did take a long time, because we not only had to undergo a transformation for the guest to see, but then internally, once again that litigation got settled, then it was like, all right, I'm running this now, and what does this mean for my family? What do we want out of this over the next 20 years? And then changing out the culture as well. It was a very it was just very different. And sometimes, like I said earlier, sometimes you just have to change your people out if they're not willing to change to the vision and the culture that you want.
We have time for about 2 more questions. Yeah.
So, hi, I'm Stephanie Melnick. Melnick and Melnick, 2 Stands Tall. I was in practice with my father for a very long time. And I think it's mostly true to say it took a pandemic to get him to decide maybe it was time to retire and hand things fully over to me. So I wonder how you managed that magical feat, maybe not for you, I don't know, with your family and your father, and how that is now and how he likes coming to business or doesn't, or, you know, all those fun questions.
Yeah, it was interesting because so I was in HR, so I was the HR manager starting in 2001, and in 2008 became the president. And again, you just have to think back, like, all right, the company, we were in this like litigation, my dad's partner died, the company is really like tired. So what I did was I actually I wrote him a paper and I just said, here's my analysis of the business, here's where I think I can help and what I think I can do. You know, and gosh, and I wish I don't even know if I still have it. He probably has it because he doesn't throw anything away. But he, you know, it was like really quick. Like it was like, I mean, like it was a decision. He's like, yeah, this sounds good. I think he talked to a couple of people and consultants that he worked with and friendships, and then he's like, yeah, I think we're gonna do this. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, I didn't think that was really gonna happen. You know, so then it's happening. And he let go really quickly, which again, if you knew my dad, you'd be shocked because because that was his baby, right? So now he's like trusting his baby to somebody who doesn't have the formalized training, but has the heart and the desire, right? So, but I think because he trusted me, because at the time we had, just prior to me coming on, we had 2 external presidents, and that didn't work out. It just wasn't right. It just wasn't right for the company. So he let go pretty quickly. Now, he still comes into the office even after all these years, and he's still, I just talked to my finance guy the other day. He's like, yeah, I met with Bill. It was supposed to be a half-hour conversation to go over the audit. It was a 2-hour conversation about strategy. So, I mean, he has access to anybody and everybody that he wants to have access to, and they love him. I mean, and he still tries to impart his wisdom, and I appreciate that. I respect that for where he is, but he also respects the role that I'm in, and he never tries to usurp that. He never says, well, we're not going to allow that. So he knows, he really took well to the boundary, and I think when I try to think about why, it must be, I think he was probably tired himself. You work your tail off, right? You start with no money, you work your tail off, because in those early years, he was the restaurateur, so he's running the restaurant, he's, baking the bread in the morning, he's closing up at night. That was back in the days when things were open till 2 a.m., so it was a ton of work, and then he got into the office and did more of that work, but then I think he just was even tired, and he thought, I don't want to think about the second foundation. I don't want to think about how we're going to improve our average unit volumes and stuff. So I think when I brought kind of an offering to him to say, like, I think that this is how we can do this, he was really relieved. So, and as long as I've always still given him a voice and respect, I think he's comfortable with that. And it doesn't mean that we always agree. Sometimes he just has to trust me, and then sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm wrong.
We have one more question.
Greetings. I am Imani Ray, and I own and operate Creative Fruits, where we specialize in carving fruits and anything that you can imagine. So I am actually looking to be able to franchise in the near future. And so with that, and me being a creative, how do you stick with your main thing, and like with Cousins Subs, you have your products and not venture off and adding more things and saying, oh, well, I think that people will like this too, or maybe we should do this and add this. How do you stay structured for that? And I know that's very important in the franchise to stick with this model, and it goes everywhere. So how do you kind of stick with that?
That's a great question. It takes a lot of discipline because, when you want more sales, you think that maybe there's like the next opportunity to expand your menu or expand what type of service you offer. And at the end of the day, what we look at is this core to our brand? Again, we make subs, but of course we sell all these other things too, but we're not going to, we're not gonna sell pizza, right? You know what I mean? So we're not gonna sell like a like a fried chicken dinner product. We're not KFC, that sort of thing, right? So we make and sell subs, but then we complement that. We stay true to that, but then we complement that, right? So, but it takes a lot, because even what we have found from time to time through the years, franchisees are very entrepreneurial people. They just want to do business through another structure that's already set up, and those are great opportunities. But then you really have to be mindful of that franchise owner as well, because there's been many times where, you know, we walk into the franchisees, you know, trying to do a fish fry on Friday, or trying to do, you know, you're just like, that's not what we do, we make and sell subs. You know, so, you know, and even though they think, well, it's gonna transform the business, it's like, we make and sell subs. I mean, like, this is just what we do, so it requires self-discipline and really that oversight to make sure that you're having that brand consistency in all of your outlets. And it's to this day, I mean, it's still tough, right? I mean, but it's something you just can never let you always have to be mindful of.
Thank you. And time is flying by fast, and I think Christine will say maybe like 10 more minutes before she has to shoot off. But one, I want you to, can you talk about the last thing? Is there anything that just people do not know about Cousins Subs or Mrs. Joe?
Yeah, if you're from Milwaukee, you think Cousins is a lot bigger because you're from Milwaukee. So we are about 100 restaurants, and we're primarily in the state of Wisconsin. You know, to contrast that with, I mean, Jimmy John's probably has 3,000 units, Jersey Mike's probably the same, Subway I think has, you know, 50,000 units worldwide, you know what I mean? So we're like tiny, we're like just little, but we're growing, and we are, one of the things we're doing this year is opening up corporate restaurants in Indianapolis. So we're branching out of Milwaukee, and I'm excited about that because through the years, Cousins has franchised in a number of different states. I could probably count 11 states that we've been in and then have retracted from franchisees, right? And that's not a blame game that the franchisees are terrible, but just what it requires to really launch a brand in a market today is so intense that we feel like we want to do that corporately. And that's like the last itch I have to scratch. Like, can we have a sustainable concept outside the state of Wisconsin and find success in the way that we have found success here? And it's just one of the personal questions I want to answer with the brand, because I think people would like subs, Cousins Subs in Indianapolis, right? Or in Cleveland, right? Or Texas, right? Or Texas, right? Because his dad winters in Texas, and my husband, he spends time on the team. He's always like, you know, Texas.
I have a home in Texas. I actually looked up trying to see how can I franchise into Texas. And they were like, no, I'm not.
You probably spoke to my husband, right?
Because people live in Texas that's from here, and I have to take subs to Texas and work them. It's like,
I know.
Homer's did that too.
Brandon
They
Bassett.
own
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate that. What part of Texas?
like Cedar Hill, Dallas area.
Dallas area, yeah. See, well, Double D's down there. You know, he's in Grapevine, so who knows? Maybe one day, right?
And they're excited about it in Indianapolis because my cousin lives there and she already posted it.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
she's like,
fantastic.
they're coming.
We are.
Like, it's up. Everyone loves Cousins.
Yeah, it's the Mayo for anybody who thinks it's the Mayo, right? Am I right? It's the Mayo, right? And the bread, but yeah, it's funny because there's these pockets of places that people would love to have Cousins, and it's a monumental effort. Like we really want to go into Indy and do it right, and you have to have a lot of capital, and today costs are just ridiculous. So really trying to get in there, but if we can prove that model out, then I think we can prove that model out in many more states. But it's my opinion that in the past we haven't really maybe approached it in the right way. So I think this is the right way, and this is what we'll find out. Stay tuned.
And before we let you go, Christine, just a quick announcement, real quick. We have a finance boot camp on June 2nd. We have a graduation please hold a date for June 6th. And then we have road mapping online with Amazon on the 14th, and there's information right here. And then we just want to thank EBI for hosting us. We want to thank Melnick and Melnick. And want to thank WOO, which is Women's Entrepreneur Week.
You do it much better. Sorry, DeShaun.
Hey, I have my voice.
Can we get a WOO? Can we get a WOO?
I want to thank Sarah and Julie and EBI owner Mike for hosting us here, and just putting this thing together. And then most importantly, I want to thank you, Christine. This was awesome. Just giving your information, talking about your journey, talking about the evolution of Cousins. And most importantly, I just thought having your vulnerability of delegating things and knowing who you are. I think as business owners, the quicker we understand who we are, I think the better our business can grow. So I just want to thank you for being here and participating in this. Thank you.
Well,